Welcome to Fairmont Crest, where honor is priced in legacy and secrets are sealed in blood. Tonight, we dive straight into the storm. Peaches admits raising Leslie while guarding a secret tied to Barbara. An anonymous lawyer drops explosive name change records filed on the eve of Barbara's death. The court rushes an emergency hearing, and the key DNA sample vanishes without a trace. With her legal shield cracking, Leslie faces a brutal choice: expose everything to save herself or stay silent and risk losing it all. Anita's velvet silence looms, ally or stonewall, and whispers of a mysterious plan B beg the question: lifeline or noose? Who tunneled into the archive logs with revoked credentials, and who profits from a perfectly timed hole in the evidence? Stay with us as we peel back the masks, trace the data tunnel, and follow the money to the one person bold enough to bend justice, because when the power board flips, only the ruthless survive. The vortex begins in a silence no one can measure by minutes, only by the weight dragging Leslie's chest downward like a damp block of lead. When Peaches admits she is the one who raised her, and more than that, the keeper of a secret tied to Barbara, the past jams itself together like a distorted frame, the edges darkened, and in the center is Leslie's face, a woman who never imagined she would one day have to stand before a mirror and stare into a self that could collapse at the very moment she believed she had touched everything Fairmont Crest applauds. But truth never arrives alone. It comes with an anonymous hand, a lawyer without a name, without a face, only documents sharp as blades, laying bare the identity change paperwork filed on the night before the date printed on Barbara's obituary. Leslie reads and feels her stomach not simple fear, but a fury that pierces the roots of her honor, because the cruelty of this script lies in how it casts her in the worst position. If Peaches is truly Barbara, she becomes the heiress suspected of profiting from a brazen switch, and the trust Anita established must be dragged into court so people can shred the very clauses Leslie relied on to build her standing. The court sets an emergency hearing, and at Fairmont Crest everything moves faster than forecast, as if an unseen pulse drives waves of public opinion toward shore without mercy. In the white space of waiting, a DNA sample vanishes from the storage room, leaving a hole in a legal wall that once seemed impenetrable. Leslie feels the trap cinch, and what smothers her is less the legal risk than the sense of betrayal by ties she believed were locked tight, sealed carefully, lacquered with moral gloss so anyone who looked would see rightful claim, family order, and a legacy that supposedly belonged to the past. But the past refuses to sleep. It turns over in every detail of Peach's file, in each line of name change entries notarized with a chill perfection, in each bank transaction moving like water and leaving pebbles small enough to trace a path. Leslie cannot stop herself from reassembling the fragments, a slender Peaches winding an arm across her shoulders in youth, eyes warm yet distant, reassurances that were never mere words but a way of clearing the road so Leslie could step into the urbane world of auctions, benefit dinners, and charitable boards where every smile is calculated, and, haunting the corners, Barbara's shadow, the city's adored foundress, now placed in the same drawer with Peaches, two faces superimposed like a convex photograph. Leslie feels saddled with a responsibility no one handed her, the pivot of a story that screams every time she tries to change direction. Anger flares like dry fire in her throat as she asks whether Peaches used love to hide manipulation or used manipulation to redefine love, when every act of care appears to bear Barbara's seal upon Leslie's fate. If Peaches is Barbara, then with all the years of care, guidance, and ushering her into the artery of power, was it a seed planted for a harvest always within reach? Or is this a nightmare staged by an enemy bent on smashing the shape of a collective legacy? Questions surge like a crowd outside the courthouse, shoving without order, and Leslie knows the person in the middle of that crush is herself. Anita enters Leslie's thoughts like a long shadow. She does not need to speak to cool the fire racing from stomach to chest. The trust Anita created has been a sturdy shield Leslie relied upon, partly because its clauses were tight, partly because of the complicated friendship between Anita and Barbara. But every shield has a hairline crack, and the trust's crack lies at the most abstract point, the legitimacy of the beneficiary. A missing DNA sample doesn't merely shake the scientific basis, it pops the lid off Pandora's box, spilling accusations of tampering, questions about who stands behind the storage facility, and suspicions of someone with a key greater than principle. Leslie tries to keep her balance on a boat dragged toward a whirlpool, but the strongest pull comes from within, a discreet humiliation at being viewed as a freeloader of good fortune, the fear of defeat in public, where everything is priced by rumor, and a primitive rage at herself for missing the Fishers, for letting her heart go soft toward a woman called foster mother who might also be her birth mother, or an imposter wearing a birth mother's mask to step back into the game. The anonymous lawyer's press brief arrives like a dirty wave, not high, but adhesive, clinging to every conversation in Fairmont Crest, to each glass of wine poured beneath amber lamps, to framed photographs on gilded walls, to the quill dipping into ink at signing tables, to napkins folded into swans at the center of banquet cloths. Leslie, who is used to controlling the narrative, becomes a narrative under control. Forced to weigh a public rebuttal against tactical silence, to choose between unmasking Peaches or protecting the nurturing memory that constructed her identity. Every choice has a price, truth does too, and sometimes it is so expensive it bankrupts what humanity remains. She imagines the closed conference rooms, Anita's level voice assessing risk, the hemlines of consultants' jackets quivering with the heartbeats they hide behind tranquil faces, the proposed strategy to peel Leslie from the Peaches storyline with legal scalpels, excising the infected tissue. But every scalpel leaves a scar. Leslie bears many glossy scars of victory, and she knows this one will be the scar the public leans close to inspect, searching for stitches that prove an ethical surgery. The night before the hearing, Leslie stands in a dark room whose objects are arranged like an exhibition of old triumphs, but the dim light turns them into skulls, their eye sockets fixed on her without blinking. She wonders how much of her is the Leslie Peaches sculpted, how much is the Leslie she chose, and how much is the Leslie the public demanded. A deeper tear of anger seeps out, no longer aimed at others, but at her dependency on beautiful narratives she has lived, at her need to believe she deserves what she has, at the pride that raised her and now shoves her toward the ledge. If Peaches is Barbara, why hide? If Peaches is not Barbara, why is there such clean evidence of a name change before the fatal date? If a DNA sample disappeared, who profits most from the vacated shelf? And why did the only technician who could vouch for the chain of custody suddenly request a week's leave right before the hearing? The questions line up like sheathed knives, ready to draw blood at the smallest misstep. Morning comes and the corridor feels colder than usual. Leslie walks through eyes that don't mean to stare, lawyers' eyes, reporters' eyes, relatives' eyes, strangers' eyes, each with an invisible label. Judgment, doubt, scrutiny, pity, curiosity. Anita appears as a point of stillness, but stone-cold stillness. No soft gestures of friendship remain, the space between them is paper and barricade. Anita must protect the trust, Leslie must protect herself, and between these twin necessities, what remains of their bond has become a variable priced in PR risk. Leslie recognizes this because she has done the same, placed every element on a strategic scale, and so she cannot blame anyone, only feel a large swath of her inside slacken like saturated cotton. Filings are submitted, opening arguments begin, and the story spun by the anonymous lawyer turns into a red thread guiding every gaze. When the missing DNA sample enters the record, Leslie feels the room change its rhythm, the air pools at her throat in clogs. She had ordered contingencies, but replicas of chain of custody logs mean little when the specimen itself has gone from the cabinet, leaving a gap that sneers at substitutes. The other side presses fingers into that soft point, drilling, circling, stringing timelines together like a strand tightening around a neck. Rumor travels faster than rulings. Before recess ends, Leslie's phone has pulsed dozens of headlines. An anonymous op-ed, likely from a ghostwriter hired to pose a question and vanish, recounts the night before Barbara's death, its tone half real, half mythic, hammering at Phoenix rebirth and women rewriting fate. Leslie schemes and nearly flings the phone, but restrains herself. In this arena, the first to lose composure loses the war. She meets privately with counsel, one focused on a narrow technical path, another floating an ugly but efficient gambit, demand cross-audits of all biological samples tied to the legacy files from the trust's early years, reframing attack as wide-scope inspection, diffusing fire. Leslie bites her lip until it breaks skin. She knows this move will resurrect ghosts. But is there any option that doesn't invite the past to collect? At home, she stands before Peach's photograph, a picture that has never told the truth about its subject, because each time she hung it, Leslie overlaid her own hope, pressing the image into an ideal. She recalls nights when Peaches sat awake in the dark, keeping silence because saying more would weary Leslie. Now silence becomes evidence against them both. Leslie wants to shatter the frame, but her hand won't commit. She fears the crash will sound like a confession. She disciplines herself and drafts a list of those with motive to make the DNA vanish, old adversaries beaten in prior deals, newer friends with loyalty not yet set, relatives who resisted her inheritance, and Peaches herself, if the name change theory is true, if she wanted to imprint total ambiguity to steer the plot from afar. Then a stranger's name flickers, no direct link, but one that brushes the storage system with enough pressure to matter. A junior technician, quiet, punctual, once, years ago, a recipient of a small scholarship Peaches funded for lab trainees. The hair on Leslie's neck rises. The connection is as slight as a fallen strand, but in law a strand of hair can be enough to weave rope. That night the rain falls as if Fairmont Crest is trying to wash itself clean. Leslie sits at the window watching water drag long tracks down the glass. Inside the rain is the sound of her heart laid bare. She thinks about requesting an independent test using her own sample, about confronting Peaches once and for all, about using the media to flip the matrix of doubt by publishing everything and absorbing the consequences. But every path pushes her toward the snapping point, and the frightening part is not knowing what she will be on the other side of it, a woman buried by her own inheritance or a new creature hardened into breathless resilience. In the dark a decision forms. One that will redefine her relationship with Peaches, with Anita, with the reputation that raised her. She will not wait for the court to finish before she lives. She will cut away the skin rotting with suspicion, even if the blade slices into healthy flesh. At dawn, Leslie sends a brief statement, no plea for sympathy, no blame, petitioning a comprehensive review of the entire chain of custody tied to the legacy case, and asking the court to impose a stricter evidentiary preservation order, including independent cameras. Reaction explodes in two directions. Some applaud courage, others jeer at self-sabotage. Analysts parse strategy. Cynics argue she wants to pull the whole house down so she won't be alone beneath it. Anita keeps quiet, a silence thick as velvet, tearing not by words but by the sense of abandonment. For a moment, Leslie remembers what they had and then shelves the memory. She knows she will need that residual warmth later to keep from turning to stone. The archive begins to be combed, and the first irregularity does not appear in the cabinet where the DNA vanished but in the system's electronic log, recording a login using credentials revoked months ago. The chill spreads faster than any plea, because this means someone deep inside has built a tunnel. The cords in Leslie's mind cinch into a knot. Where does the tunnel lead, to whom, and where does Peaches stand on that map? If Peaches is not Barbara, why does a structure so precise arise at the perfect moment? If Peaches is Barbara, what message lies in scrambling the evidence, a warning or a punishment? And Anita, with all her crisis instincts, is she silent because she's waiting for Leslie to expose a weakness, or because another defense tier is being raised at a depth Leslie has never yet reached? Hemmed by questions, Leslie makes a choice she knows will cost her allies. She hires a private investigative team outside Fairmont Crest's circles, beholden to no one, owing no favors, answerable only to contract and mute proof. Many will call it a vote of no confidence in the system, but what confidence remains when the drizzle of doubt has hollowed the foundation? The team slips into overlooked corners, graveyard shift login habits, tiny power flickers never logged because thresholds weren't met, cameras tilted a few degrees to create the precise blind spot at the precise moment, and the petty history of micro-scholarships Peaches once sponsored. Fragments locked together into shape, a grotesque shape Leslie hesitates to name. Each piece that snaps in place breaks off a splinter of her pride, each increase in clarity peels a layer of her defenses, and the longer she looks the purer the anger grows, no longer petty, but the white-hot rage of a person pranked with her own life. The next hearing unfolds in an atmosphere that has lost neutrality. Everyone understands the game has escaped the confines of pure law. When the plaintiffs press to halt trust disbursements until legitimacy is verified, Leslie feels the cord tighten at her throat, but she presses her mouth shut so the fire won't spill out. She wonders how many are praying for her fall, how many wait to seize her place, how many mask their glee as pity. She knows this world runs on jungle law wrapped in silk. She has used that silk herself. Now she faces those same yards of satin binding her wrists. In the midst of the tug-of-war, an envelope slides to her counsel's table, no return address, containing a printout of an old email from years before, between Anita and a secondary fund manager, referencing a plan B should the beneficiary's legitimacy ever be challenged. Leslie reads, heart-skipping, this is the defense layer she never knew existed, the escape hatch prepared and never discussed. What is Plan B? A genetic dossier stored outside the system? A secret pact with someone who can authenticate her origin? Or a strategy to sacrifice part of the trust to save the rest, which would mean shoving Leslie from the center of power? Home at night is no shelter. It is a lab for feelings where every reaction is mirrored by unblinking glass. Leslie pores over copies and, for the first time in years, Lets herself picture the worst scenario: losing formal standing, losing a portion of the trust, losing public faith, losing the loyal. She is not afraid of losing assets, she is afraid of losing her name. A woman like her exists by name. History is written straight with that name. If it gets smudged, past victories will be reread as accidents or filthy luck. Anger rises again, calmer this time, like coals stroked by an even breath. She feels a quiet, durable resolve. Whatever Peaches is, whoever Barbara was or is, whatever Anita becomes, Stonewall or ally, she will not allow others to tell this story. She will tell it in a way that forces a difficult truth. Truth is not merely the output of a lab test, it is the chain of choices that builds dignity. Before sunrise she drafts a private memo, a vow. 3 actions, at once. First, publicly disclose the hiring of an independent investigative unit, accept the backlash, and compel the system to audit itself. Second, invite an ethics oversight body from forensic science as a third party with rights of access. Third, ask Anita to meet in private, not to beg for rescue, but to confront the residue of their relationship and decide whether they will jointly reveal Plan B. She knows each step will carve lines into her image. Cuts will not kill her, it is the suppuration of silence that does. As morning pales, Leslie rises into a day she knows will grant no favors. Somewhere in Fairmont Crest, perhaps Peaches is watching, perhaps Barbara smiles from behind velvet, perhaps Anita places pieces on an entirely different board, perhaps the anonymous lawyer is loading a second volley. Will the missing DNA be found? Where does the login tunnel run, and to whom? Is Plan B a lifeline or a noose dangling from the rafters? And when the paint of morality is scraped off, does the wood beneath hold fast or reveal a cavity eaten by years of termites? Leslie no longer has easy answers, only footfalls that must be sure. In a game where others have set traps with love, with legacy, with the name of mother, the only way not to suffocate is to learn to breathe inside the cage and bend its bars with her own hands. She wonders, at the end of this tunnel, if the light she finds will be freedom's or the operating lamp of a rebirth that demands payment with precisely what she once believed untouchable. And when that moment comes, who will remain beside her, who will pass by, who will nudge her shoulder faster toward the edge? The questions pour like rain is steady, unbroken, but threaded through the rain is another rhythm, small yet insistent, the cadence of resolve, bracing each millimeter of spine, so that even if the road becomes a firing range she will keep her posture, telling her story in a way that makes every eye blink against a gaze that refuses to bow. Fairmont Crest is holding its breath. A DNA sample has vanished, a revoked account has suddenly come alive, and Plan B surfaces like a key that could either save Leslie or finish her off. Leslie chooses to shine a light on the system itself, hiring independent investigators, inviting ethical oversight, and accepting a hit to her image to preserve the truth. Anita remains silent. Is she a lifeline or the stone tied to Leslie's ankle at the last second? And Peaches, if she is Barbara, why sabotage the evidence? If not, who has the power to bend the chain of custody at the critical moment? Next, we'll chase Plan B to the end, reconstruct every minute of the night the sample disappeared, and name every blind spot in the archive. When the moral paint is scraped away, will the wood beneath be solid or hollowed out? Comment below. Who benefits most from that empty shelf? An old enemy, a new ally, Anita, or Peaches herself? Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell. When the evidence speaks, every mask faces 2 choices: fall quietly or shatter under the lights.